And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana, elevating the cause of constitutional conservative citizens across the state, and rapidly now draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is The State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your day. We are so grateful for you. You're the best listening family anyone could possibly hope for, and we are only here because of your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. If you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd really appreciate it if you'd also help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can share short clips instead of the full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels, and links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us.
Well, today we have a real journalist and truth teller, someone who has been playing a huge role in establishing platforms for other conservative voices along with his own, the one and only Joe Hoft. Before we meet Joe, let me read the scripture of the day. Today's scripture is Psalm chapter 34, verses 11 through 17. And it says, "Come, children of God, and listen to me. I'll share the lesson I've learned of fearing the Lord. Do you want to live a long, good life, enjoying the beauty that fills each day? Then never speak a lie or allow wicked words to come from your mouth. Keep turning your back on every sin and make peace your life motto. Practice being at peace with everyone. The Lord sees all we do. He watches over his friends day and night. His godly ones receive the answers they seek whenever they cry out to him." And if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I often say that God's instruction may not be easy, but it's not complicated. It's very simple. It's model your life after the only perfect one who ever lived, our Savior, King Jesus. Be honest. Put others before yourself. Refuse to lie or give in to sin. These are very simple things, but they're very difficult for perhaps our ego, our pride, our will. But pursue an honest and pure life as you pursue a deeper relationship with the Lord. Continually allow Holy Spirit to guide and correct you, and you'll find that he supplies your every need, your every answer, and he opens doors that we have no ability or access to open apart from him.
And you're so right, Danielle, that it's not complicated, but it's certainly not easy, to navigate some of the things that we have to navigate, as citizen advocates. And I know our guest today understands all about navigating thorny issues and trying to rise above the fray to advance the truth. What a pleasure to have Joe Hoft with us today, one of the founders of the Gateway Pundit, and has now gone off and started his own venture. Joe, how are you, man? Thanks for being with us.
Hey, I'm great. It's an honor to be here. Thanks, guys.
Tell us about the new venture, joehoft.com. How is it going?
Well, it's going great. It's been a little scary to kind of step out and do this, but I'm real happy so far with where we're at and what's going on. As you guys, I could probably tell a little bit of my history. I'm twin brother to Jim Hoft. My brother Jim actually founded Gateway Pundit in 2004 or so almost 20 years ago. He said he started a blog. I didn't even know what that meant, and nobody did really back then. There's only a few sites out there. Jim just kept at it day after day, year after year for years. Didn't make any money, had a full-time job. Found a position where he was almost forgotten, and he did a lot of website posting while at work even. And it did, really well. He got a lot of these little kisses along the way where somebody would say, "Wow, this is great what you're doing." And that meant a lot to him. And then some of these other sites would share stuff, and that meant a lot to him. And then eventually people just started coming to his site. And after about 10 years, it really blossomed. The Tea Party, Obama. And then came 2016. That's when I joined Jim. I was overseas. I was in Hong Kong. I was corporate executive in Hong Kong. We both loved Trump, though, and And I ended up talking to Jim about how I thought Ted Cruz was going to be eliminated by the end of the month. As a matter of fact, I can mention the day. It was a month away. I said he's just not going to have enough delegates left. I put it up. Drudge Report put it up. And back then, Drudge was king. Now I don't even go there.
I haven't been to Drudge in God so long.
Yeah, I was so disappointed. I started writing him, after the 2016 election, comment section like, is George Soros running the site? What's going on here?
Wow.
Yeah, right.
And, it was just horrible. But back then it was king. And if you got a story there, you were flying high. And that piece that I put up, Drudge put up at the top of his page off to the side. Jim calls me up. I'm in Hong Kong. We're still talking about every day. And says, did you contact Drudge? Of course I didn't. I don't know Drudge's number or anything. And he was excited. So was I. And then a month later, when the election of East Coast occurred in the primaries, Ted Cruz was eliminated almost to the delegate that I had estimated it would be at. And Drudge had 2 days in a row my stories, top stories at Drudge. And so that was like, I was king of the world. I'd be taking a ferry ride on a boat from Hong Kong, from one island to another, wanting to stand up and scream, hey, I just got headlined at Drudge. And of course, knew nobody would even understand what I'm talking about. But that's kind of how I got involved. And then I started writing for Jim every day, even though I had a full-time position. And it just kind of felt like it was my contribution to the country. And we're thrilled with the presidential race, how Trump won. It was a great day. I was in Australia when that happened. I could tell you a quick story there too. I was at this board meeting like a couple days after the election. Of course, everywhere it's the top story. Like, God, Trump won. And I had brought a flag with me, a MAGA flag. And this one guy from Canada who didn't like Trump but knew I did. They all knew I did. And they said, you got anything? I said, this flag. He goes, great. We put it up in the board where the board dinner was going to be held. Everybody walks in the room. Then there's this MAGA flag on the
wall. Way to represent.
Yeah, it was up for about 5 minutes. It was up, and then it had to take it down. And gosh. Yeah, it was great stuff. Those were great days then. And then, then it occurred the attacks and everything. I was involved in all that. And I could tell you, a little bit more of my story. I know I'm going off script here, but what happened to me then after about 4 years is in 2020, as COVID's coming on, I wrote a piece for the Gateway Pundit where I looked at the numbers and I said, from the WHO, they didn't add up. They didn't make sense. Nobody else was saying this at the time. I'm telling you not. I can't remember reading anything from anybody. Everybody's scared. And I put this piece up saying, no, if this thing's going to be about as bad as the flu, look at the numbers. They're commingling the numbers. They're bastardizing the numbers. They just they weren't accurate. And I put that up. Alex Jones had us on the next day. And then the following day, I got doxxed by Media Matters. And so after being with this company for 20 years, an executive, having been blessed, I flew around the world, got to see all these great places. The company was in great sites, great cities. And it loves the people, and they loved me. I had a 20-year anniversary while in Hong Kong in the second largest office for this company. And they did a surprise party for me on a Friday, brought me in and said, Joe, a lot of nice things. It was really sweet. And they said, Joe, a lot of these people never get to go over to the U.S. Their only picture is maybe movies and you. I was like the only U.S. guy there in the office. And they go, and it's a good picture. And, that was such a blessing because I didn't know it. None of us knew it. But 6 months later, we'd have to go through this thing with my company because Media Matters doxed me, and it ended up, I ended up retiring, coming back to the States then. And it was pretty unfortunate, but it turned into a blessing because like a week later, Hong Kong changed the law that if you say anything bad about China, we're going to send you to China. So it was a blessing as God works, And I got back here during COVID. And I guess maybe one final point on all that is just that looking back, the pieces that we got hit hardest on, like that one, were the ones where we were absolutely over target. We were saying this thing's not as bad as they're telling us. And we were courageous enough to do that. And Alex Jones was courageous enough to get us on a show, along with another guy who was saying, no, we're all going to die. Then I come up and say this, and I'm kind of sticking out here. Nobody else is saying it. They didn't like that. They couldn't have that. They being the deep state or this monsters, the evil that's, trying to take over this world. they couldn't have it. And so looking back, those are the stories they hit the most because they needed that narrative that this thing is so bad, we're all going to die, scare everybody. That way we can manipulate them. We can do all sorts of things. We can even force them into vaccine mandates and stuff. So that's amazing. I think there's a lesson there too. The things you get hit on the hardest oftentimes are the ones that are spot on.
It is so true, Joe. It's so true. In fact, as you were talking, you reminded me of something that Plato said many, many, many years ago. He said that no one is more hated than he who speaks the truth. So the more you're hated, that really is a pretty strong indication that you're speaking the truth. No question about it. How early on, Joe, in the COVID pandemic, were you sort of on to the game? I can remember reading very early on from the World Health Organization, and they weren't out there advertising it, but they had actually said that COVID really is not fatal and really does not pose a significant threat to, 99% of the population? And I couldn't quite reconcile that statistic with all of the chaos and all of the urgency that was being encouraged and imposed upon the citizens and all the draconian lockdowns and all that. I never quite could reconcile those two things. But it sounds like you pretty much had it figured out rather early on.
Yeah, thanks. I think, Jim and I were talking about every day, and I just, it's just like, this doesn't make sense. And after a while, you just start calling, BS, and it's like, this isn't, something's wrong here. It just doesn't feel right. And that's something I've learned especially it seems like the last few years, to trust my gut more and more. The more I trust my gut, I think the smarter I am. And and maybe that comes with time. Some people get it right away. For me, I question a lot of things, and my gut's telling me something. And sometimes, you don't trust it. But then, yes, most time it's pretty spot on. There's something going on there. So, I'll tell you, I was actually sick in October of 2019. Went into the hospital for 5 days in Hong Kong with something, and I believe it was COVID. I've had a couple of doctors tell me that was COVID. I lost my taste, my sense of taste. Everything tasted like cardboard. I'm telling my wife, my lungs were cracked.
That's a symptom for sure.
Yeah, October of 2019, and then we happened to be in China on January 1st of 2020, and over there the lockdowns and stuff started at the Chinese New Year mid-January, and I was never a fan of wearing those masks. I just thought those were just couldn't breathe, I just hated it.
The worst.
Yeah. So so I knew that this is crazy. And then you start reading stuff. Even back then they were saying these masks, it's like, it didn't make sense. And yet I had a good friend who was a wonderful person, lady, a doctor that worked at the firm that I worked at. And, she was listening to all this advice, and she was a good person. But I'd say things like, these things don't help. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And, so early on, I was already feeling something's not right here. This mask really drove me crazy.
Yeah. One of the things, Joe, that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Brought out in his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, regardless of what you may agree or disagree with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on, one of the points that he's made that I thought was just so profound and so true is a concept that he calls regulatory capture. And it is a situation where the regulatory agencies, are all sort of beholden to Big Pharma because Big Pharma pumps so much money into those regulatory agencies and funds them in significant degree, and so it's very difficult to trust often what they're actually saying. Do you think that that's a part of the reason why we were getting such misinformation from the regulatory agencies?
Great point. And I agree. And I'm also thinking about something, though, that's kind of happened to me, some new information that I've learned over the last really 5 or 6 months. I was asked to speak at this group in Florida called Able Child. And this lady 20 years ago started this group because she was standing up saying they tried to get her kid on some drugs at school. She didn't want her kid to get on drugs, and she said no. And she went through a hard time in standing up against the schools. And as she studied this, they saw other moms. She started helping others. She started this firm or this nonprofit called Able Child. What she found is like even the list of symptoms for kids that they want to give ADHD medicine isn't scientific. It's just, does your son get up, or daughter, or whatever, your child get up out of his seat in school? Does he look out the window? Does he, things like that kids do. Yeah. Especially boys do.
Exactly. I'm like, they're not asking the question, is your child's teacher boring? Is this the way your child learns?
Yeah. Or maybe he's bored because they're brilliant, And so anyways, that's what she started. And she started standing up against, ironically, big pharma. And what she's finding is it's kind of the opposite of what you were saying, Chris. It's like, not only is the government beholden to the money from big pharma is beholden to the money that flows through the government to them. And so they're pushing these policies like, we will help you diagnose children. Big pharma's behind that so that they can make a lot of money. And they are. They're making like something like I heard $75 billion industry, these psychological drugs. And then she started looking at these mass murders and again, especially these kids, most all, if not all, were on some sort of drug. And she's saying these drugs aren't safe. And instead of dealing with the real problem, the government, big pharma, this collusion and these drugs they're putting people on, even this guy in Maine that just shot 18 people on drugs, as she looks at it, instead of focusing on that, we're focusing on guns. And we're saying, they put Remington out of business up in Connecticut because they blamed it on the guns. The kid there was jacked up on drugs. They don't talk about that. They protect the doctor, the drug company, and the schools. And she's saying, no, this isn't right. And I feel like she was like 20 years ahead of her time. She's pointing out, no, this is not the case. It's Big Pharma has a lot to do with this, and they're manipulating the news to say it's the guns, and it never was the guns. They're ignoring the real problem, the real problem, the root cause, which is drugs.
Yeah, and you're so right, Joe, because if you think about where she started, it starts with someone saying that there's something inherently wrong with you as a person, as a child. And let us put some external thing into you to change you to behave the way we want you to behave. And then once you behave, then your decisions and your actions can obviously all be blamed on, if you get violent, it could be blamed on guns. It could never be blamed on the original external input of the drug.
Yeah. And that's what's happening. These drug companies are getting, they're getting sued and shut down and kicked out of the state, and they are not the problem. And I this is, maybe I can relate because this is kind of my background was in finance and audit. And oftentimes an auditor would have a conclusion or possibly a solution to an issue, but if they don't address the root cause, they got the wrong answer. And so it was really important to make sure that when you made some sort of recommendation for a fix and control weakness or whatever, that it's accurate, that it's really based on the root cause and not something else. And that happens a lot, but we're being fooled, I think. And I think Big Pharma's been around a long time. It's making billions.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping, that helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
Joe, what do you think accounts for the fact that so many, such a significant percentage, it seems like, hopefully increasing numbers, but still a significant percentage of the American population just takes these recommendations from the CDC and the National Institute of Health and Dr. Fauci formerly and so forth, just takes these recommendations at face value, even up to just being immediately willing to take an experimental vaccine despite increasing evidence that it's harmful to people. Why are many American citizens not more skeptical? Why do they not challenge the government narrative more than they do? Americans historically have a reputation for being skeptical about our government. You know, Thomas Paine said, at best, government is a necessary evil. At worst, it's an intolerable one. What happened to our population, or a significant percentage of it, that changed that and made them sort of so reflexive compliant with government decree?
Oh, that's a great question, Chris. I think, you know what I think? I think we got, lulled to sleep because, like, for me in the corporate world and in finance, at one point I was overseeing the financial reporting on $1 billion block of business. At another point, I was traveling the world doing these audits around the world, probably 300. And so a lot of work was put into place to ensure that our financials were accurate. We had all sorts of things we had to do. Systems, processes, and support all had to be there for everything, 100%. And so I think there's this thought process that we just we assume that the government's being held to the same standards, that in our elections or with the CDC or whoever it might be, that our government is complying as well. And the case is that's just not the case. For example, I formed this group not long ago to look into the election. There's about 30 of us, of which maybe 10 of us really do most of the heavy lifting. And we wanted to look at the election process and figure out how can we ensure that we put in place enough things in the 2024 election so that it can't be stolen. But there's parameters around this. For example, we can't rely on law enforcement. We saw that, and this is you guys. I've written 3 books on this called the Steel series. They're out on Amazon. You can pick them up there. Steel Volume 1, 2, and 3. First book was on setting the stage, all the things they did before the election. With hindsight, we can say, "My God, they were planning on this." The second book was called The Impossible Occurs. It's all the things that happened in the election that's like, my God, of course it was stolen. And really in every chapter in that book, I say it was stolen because it never should have been certified. Like in the corporate world, if you have the controls that aren't in place, an auditor has the duty to say, hey, note that. And if it's material enough, it's a really serious issue, could impact your financials and therefore your stock price. So people take it real serious. So anyways, the third book is on the cover-up, and it was like law enforcement wasn't there. Philadelphia, for example, we couldn't get in for 3 days. They kicked us out. We couldn't even get in. We had a court order even. They couldn't get in. We saw it now with Bill Barr. We're finding out more and more information as the days go by still in 2020, how the law enforcement just was not there for us. And then we learned that the courts weren't there for us. I mean, the Texas case is thrown out, 20-some states, maybe almost 30, President Trump, and they say he doesn't have standing. And which was insane. And I've had a guest on my program from Italy laugh about that, saying, why would you say that the president has no standing in that election? It was asinine and insane. And then the third piece is the legislatures weren't there for us. So the thesis behind this group that we're formed right now is we've got to figure out how we can do this without relying on any of those. And it's going to be a challenge, but we looked at all the controls that we think should be in place. We identified 520 controls that should be in place in the election process in order for it to work, efficiently, accurately, transparently, et cetera, and similar to what we would have in the corporate world. And out of the 520 controls we identified within 13 processes, so we got, for example, voter rolls is one process, systems is a process, et cetera. Only 1/3 of all those controls are in place. So about 300 controls we identified aren't even in place right now. And yet we're sitting back and believing that this election process is the same as the rigorous work that's done in corporations to ensure that the corporation's financials, for example, are perfect.
And Joe, when you say that only a small number of the controls and processes are in place, or I guess the controls are in place, are they even, when you look at them, are they even properly in place, or is it kind of a ramshackle situation?
Well, that's a good question. I guess our analysis is saying, are they in place at all? And you're right. I mean, as an auditor, you'd look at, is there a control there in the first place? Is it well designed? And then is it working effectively? And all three of those questions have to be answered, yes, in order to sign off on the financials. And in a corporation, we had about 1,000 controls, maybe worldwide, in a multinational, that we're going to look at every year, test, and ensure that they're in place. And yet with our elections, they're not. And so my thesis in the second book of The Steal was, at every chapter, it was like, and because of this, the election never should have been certified. And I say that over and over in that book. This election never should have been certified. It wasn't certifiable. Yeah. It just wasn't. And I stand by that to this day. It was a mess, and we never should have certified it. Mike Pence, Pelosi on January 6th, when they certified that, to me, that was a crime. And actually, I believe it may be a federal crime. There's enough evidence out there to say this election wasn't accurate in probably every state. And I haven't really studied every state, but I just think, yeah, probably that this thing never should have been certified.
We saw a story on your website this morning that you outlined newly obtained evidence from America First Legal's recent FOIA. And it said that you believe that acts of treason may have been committed because Chris Krebs and other government employees of CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, knew what was true about COVID. They knew that the mail-in ballots had problems, were easy to manipulate. And could you just tell us a little bit about what was uncovered in that recent Freedom of Information Act?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for mentioning that too. Yeah, what happened, there was really kind of two posts the last couple of days, both connected to Rasmussen Reports, that polling company. And, by the way, just about Rasmussen, they've done a great job. And they did a poll back in April last year asking people basically, was the election rigged or not? 62% of Americans believe the election's rigged. So we're not, we're just sharing the truth. We've got evidence to support our side, and Americans believe it. And so this effort's like what you guys are doing here, it's not for naught. It's really important that we continue to share the truth and continue to, throw all this out there. Yesterday's post from Rasmussen had to deal with some, I should pull it up here. It's at joehoft.com. You can pick it up. And actually, Rasmussen reposted my post on this. There's a Heartland Institute that came out, and they took Rasmussen's polling, where they came out, maybe you saw this a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, maybe a couple months. They came out and said, hey, 1/5 or 20% of all Americans that mailed in ballots reported that they basically committed some sort of crime. They filled it out for somebody else. They, mailed it in for somebody else. They signed it for somebody else, and all that stuff's not legit. And so this Heartland Institute determined that, hey, based on that, President Trump won the election. He won. If we factor all that in, just that, he won. And that doesn't surprise me at all. Today, they came out with more evidence, like you said, about this CISA report. What happened, these people did a FOIA against CISA. They get this report that says basically, like you said, Danielle, that the CISA, this department by Chris Krebs, that said, remember, he says, well, it's the most secure election in U.S. history. A total lie. And I was talking to Emerald Robinson on my show that I do in the mornings from 10 to 11 right now on TNT radio.live. I had Emerald on. She says she's got a document from some guy who worked at the CISA who said that was absolutely wrong. First of all, Krebs didn't have the ability or know-how to even say that. He's not an IT expert. And he went on to say all these things. And The CISA knew that the election wasn't secure, according to this FOIA document that this group had obtained, this America First Legal. They knew that mail-in voting was less secure. They knew that there was no risk in voting or in increasing the spread of COVID by voting in person, and all these things that were used against us to destroy our election process in 2020. And Krebs and these groups knew it. And what Rasmussen is saying is, isn't this treason? Isn't it treason to destroy an American election? They how did they say it? They say something very similar. It's like the government directed destabilization of a national election, and that's treason. And so big words, but absolutely accurate. This is the thing I think that we live in over the last 4 or 5 years or more, maybe since Obama, really, is that people aren't held accountable. We're getting used to it. It's not right. And yet we sit back and allow this to happen, expecting that these people in charge will do what they're supposed to do, kind of like we do with the corporate world. We expect that same synopsis, and yet it's not even close to occurring.
That's right. Yeah. Because obviously accountability in the private sector is a much more concrete reality than it is on the government side. And speaking of a lack of accountability, I have to get your opinion on this, Joe. Tucker Carlson, I believe yesterday or very, very recently, actually interviewed Vladimir Putin, and my understanding, I haven't confirmed this, was that Vladimir Putin, I believe he said something like the United States is entering into or is in a very dark stage, and he said the people who make the decisions at the top level of the American government, he said, are not accountable. They're not, it's not the elected officials principally who were making the decisions. It's the people in the black robes, for lack of a better word, the black suits behind the scenes whose names nobody knows and have been elected by nobody. That's a scary thought to me.
He's spot on. And I think, I put a piece up this morning too, how CNN and others, they're freaking out. They're calling Tucker a traitor. They're saying, just terrible things about Tucker. Totally freaked out. Not just Tucker, but all of us. Calling Tucker a MAGA guy, like it's wrong to want to make America a better place. These people are sick, and that's why their viewership stinks, and it's going down and down and down. We don't need to believe any of these polls or whatever that says people are watching CNN. It ain't happened. The only time I see CNN is when I see something on social media about how ridiculous they are.
I thought you were going to say, Joe, the only time you see CNN is when you're walking through the airport, and every television in the airport has got CNN on it. And I think all 1,500 of CNN's viewers are hanging out in airports.
Yeah, right. Force fed this stuff. Yeah. Just shock.
But you agree, obviously, with Putin on the issue that the people making these critical decisions and these recommendations and really setting policy are administrative bureaucrats who have not been elected, and I assume have lifelong job security. Is that right? Is there any way to get rid of those people?
That's a good question. Other than just firing him, what's Trump going to do? Saying he wins, he should win. That if we have a free and fair election, he will win. What does he do on day one with these monsters that are in these various entities across the U.S.? They got to be gone. They got to be removed. They got to be real strong too. I mean, I compare this to drug addicts and alcoholics or whatever. When they go to achieve sobriety, they have to change everything. They got to stop everything. You cannot continue to take drugs or just try to control it. It's easier to just end it, stop it. And I think our country needs an intervention of sorts. We need to just wipe some of these departments and much of it, get rid of it altogether. And then bring in good people to run some of these entities. I think there are a lot of good people in America. Some see it, some don't, and some are just really busy with their own lives and enjoying going out and golfing on the weekend and going to their kids' games and stuff like that. And that's great. That's why we work so hard, is to get that stuff. But we've got to, we're going to have wholesale changes in this country come next year in January.
I was going to ask, Trump is more popular than ever. Every lawsuit that hits him just, spins up his popularity more and more. And you've done, as you mentioned, a lot of research in this space. You have 3 books just about the 2020 election steal. Based on your research and what you know about the election lawsuits that are in play, what do you think we can expect in the next couple of months leading up to the election? Can we even have a regular election?
Well, that's a good question. I'll tell you something. I've talked to one guy who's going to be coming out with court cases in multiple states. It's going to be suing based on the basis that the federal law is being broken. He's going to do this in federal courts. And the thesis is there was more than enough evidence in 2020, probably just in voter rolls alone, to show that these elections never should have been certified. And he says by certifying them, this guy's a real expert on HAVA, the HAVA Act. And he says crimes were committed. And actually individuals now will be accountable if this is the truth. You can sue an individual, and it goes in federal law against your civil rights. And that's what he's attempting to do. He's going to do that across the country. So that would send shockwaves if we. And his remedy is let's get rid of these machines.
Yeah, speaking of the machines, Joe, one of the biggest pushes, as you well know, down here in Louisiana from LeCag, our group from the State of Freedom, is to relentlessly try and expose the acute vulnerabilities of these machines. There's so much to talk about there, but as you know, most recently, Alex Halderman, who is not just arguably, but strong argument that he is the premier cybersecurity election expert in the entire world and no Trump supporter. And very recently in a federal court in Georgia, he was actually able within a few short seconds to actually hack into the ballot marking devices in a Dominion voting machine right in front of a federal judge in federal court. And I was like just stunned by that. I shouldn't have been, because he had said that it's possible to do that. What is your response to the fact that, does that suggest or just confirm that these voting machines, particularly these Dominion machines, are just have gaping vulnerabilities?
Yeah, of course they do. And that was his report after the 2020 election. It was Dominion machines that he looked at in Georgia. He said 3 things key in his report, which we didn't get for 2 years because the Obama judge, Totenberg in Georgia, wouldn't allow us to see it. It got so bad that this entity called the CISA, that we've talked about here briefly with Krebs and how they said everything was fine, they actually then wrote a report about Halderman's report before Halderman's report was released by corrupt Judge Totenberg. And they said 3 things. And this is what I write about in my book about the systems. All I had to do is go to the government's own report, the CISA's own report. They say systems aren't secure. A bad actor can hack in relatively easy. And once in, they can flip an election. That's basically what he said. And then eventually they released his report. So we know that from these systems that they should not be in use. And again, in the corporate world, if I said, hey, this system is got security issues, immediately, you wouldn't wait to go to the board to talk about this. Immediately that system would be shut down. It'd be moved and quarantined, and you put it over here until you can ensure that nobody's sneaking into our, the system to steal our information or to insert a malware or something like that. We've got to have our information, and that's how we'd handle it in the private sector, but not with with our elections. And we've got this evidence, so it kind of grabs. Here's the point. I was talking to Emerald Robinson about this morning. What's going to happen? Well, I'm thinking. I don't know. They may keep these systems in place. They may have a minor patch that they put in place and suggest that that's going to fix it. I don't think that will fix it. The thing that we've uncovered is that there's now new systems that a lot of people don't even know about that are being put in place. For example, these poll pads that you see now, when you go in, you sign in on this poll pad. Well, of course, these things are connected to the internet, or somehow they're connected to a main source. These new companies are selling a software that will tell you on election night exactly what the status is of the election. I believe they're gaining that information through these poll pads. Maybe there's other means as well. But we know that they're selling this technology now. They're selling the poll pads. They're selling a voter registration module where you can sign people up to be on the voter rolls. They've got another module which is print on demand. So you could sign somebody up and then print out a ballot and fill it out for somebody. Stuff is so sinister and people don't even understand or know about it. It's through companies like Knowink, that's Knowink, and others that are really now have got these modules around the country. So my thinking is maybe this Dominion thing is a head fake, because I don't trust the judge at all. Judge Totenberg is corrupt. She's an Obama judge. And her sister apparently was on, it was a PBS or something. And maybe her parents came over after World War II, claimed to be Jews who were fleeing the Holocaust. I'm not sure anymore on people that say that. Some of the people, based on their actions since then. This lady has not been a friend of the American people by holding this report of Haldeman's for 2 years. Why is she now coming out and saying and allowing him to show this flaw in these systems in her court? It doesn't make sense unless she was totally caught off guard. The remedy, of course, is take the thing out of production until you're convinced that the system will work properly and be secure. We're not hearing calls for that. So I don't know what's going to happen here, but I think it could be a head fake. They could say, let's get rid of all the machines and then just rely on this new system.
Yeah.
Get new worse machines.
Worse machines, yeah. And Joe, when Haldeman testified before the Louisiana Voting System Commission a couple of years ago, he was front and center in front of the whole commission, including our Secretary of State, who was the chairman of that commission. And Haldeman was very clear, and this is a quote, that he said, universal use of ballot marking devices is a major security challenge because they can be hacked, and if they are hacked, they can misprint or alter votes. He says they are a large, attractive target to hackers, making attacks more likely. And he said that they can be hacked without being detected by election officials. The election officials will have no idea that the system is being hacked. And Haldeman is sitting there saying this, and he's saying we need secure hand-marked paper ballots with risk-limiting audits, except in the case of the disabled, who should be able to use a ballot marking devices if they physically can't mark a machine. He was very clear about that. Other cyber experts from Cornell and from other universities and researchers have said the same thing. So why do you think it is, Joe, that there is such institutional resistance on the part of state-level election officials to do what's necessary to fully secure the system and to convert to secure hand-marked paper ballots? It has been truly astonishing, the level of resistance. What are your thoughts on why that's the case?
Good question. I think a lot of these people are just kind of maybe elderly, but they don't have a clue on IT. They're lost. They're not IT auditors. They're not IT specialists, and they're signing off on stuff that they never should sign off on. They don't have the expertise to know what's going on. The thing that you mentioned there too, that I've written about too, is about these audits. He says there's risk limiting audit. Well, I'll tell you, as an auditor who's done audits around the world, they are a total joke. I was a bank auditor for a while once in St. Louis, showed up at robberies after banks had been robbed, about 5 of them, and had to count the money to see what was left so we could see how much was stolen. So the thing that grabbed me about our elections is they're just like money. These ballots are so important. My God, look at what Joe Biden's doing to America. He is destroying this country. The southern border is a nightmare. We've got people in this country we can't trust that are villains. Clearly, we know there's terrorists in the country today because of Joe Biden, that open border. We've seen trillions of dollars spent. We're seeing Biden fund the Ukraine against Russia, trying to get us in a war with Russia. I had George Papadopoulos on my show Monday, and he said this statement, and I just like, wow, it's so profound because it's so true, so simple that Democrats, they want to go to war with Russia. Yeah, he's right. Yeah, they were with the Russia collusion thing. I was like at the time thinking, why are they doing this? Russia's got nukes. This is really, really dangerous. Why are they poking Russia? And now Biden then starts a war with Ukraine. That war would be done, years ago if it wasn't for Biden, propping it up, keep funding it. And like Tucker said, just over the last 24 hours, I saw him saying, here's why we came here. Here's why we're talking to Putin. And he says, hundreds of thousands of men in Ukraine are dying. And we're propping that up. We have every, reason to figure out what's going on over there in Russia, Ukraine. And why not talk to Putin? We have an obligation to do it. And so, yeah, it's, it's just, it's pretty shocking, what these guys have been doing. It's really dangerous what they've done, and allowing Joe Biden to come in and just destroy this country, Ukraine and others, Afghanistan. It's just been a nightmare to watch why elections are so important.
And be sure and join us tomorrow for the second part of our two-part series with Joe Hoft. What an incredible American, and it's not something that you want to miss.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to The State of Freedom, LLC, at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.